The year was 330, counting from the birth of Christ. In the cool, slightly crisp air over the Ethiopian highlands, beneath the relentless gaze of the African sun, a rhythmic, pounding sound echoed through the landscape. Thousands of hands strained and pulled, tugging on thick ropes woven from palm fibers, their strength concentrated in unison. Thousands of voices merged into a guttural cry that set the relentless pace for an effort that defied human limits. Piece by piece, centimeter by centimeter, an enormous carved stone needle emerged from the earth. This was no ordinary monument, it was a monolithic stele carved from a single block of syenite, weighing more than 500 tons. Its surface was adorned with intricate carvings, depicting a multi-tiered palace complete with windows and doors, an astonishing feat of craftsmanship. This monument was more than just a memorial, it was a bold proclamation, a challenge thrown down to gods and mortals alike. Frozen in granite, it embodied hubris and devotion, a testament to the capabilities and aspirations of the people who built it. No one among those workers, overseers, or priests knew at that moment that this stele, now celebrated as the Great Stele of Aksum, would eventually become the final colossal monument of their pagan faith. They remained unaware that far to the north, in bustling ports along the Red Sea, seeds of change were already being sown, transformations destined to forever alter the soul of their kingdom. They did not realize that, at the court of their young ruler, King Ezana, 2 foreign boys had survived a shipwreck, boys whose words one day would wield more influence than centuries of tradition, and whose god would eclipse the mighty war god Marum. This is a story about the kingdom of Aksum, an empire that the Persian prophet Mani ranked alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the 4 greatest powers of the ancient world. A kingdom that controlled vital trade routes between India and the Mediterranean, minted its own gold coins, and extended its influence across both sides of the Red Sea. It is a tale of a forgotten African superpower, one of the first nations in the world to adopt Christianity as its official religion, to develop a unique alphabet and architectural style, and to flourish at the pinnacle of its might before facing a formidable enemy who would change the course of history. Slowly, the empire faded into legend, leaving behind enormous stone stele carved into mountainsides, churches etched into the rocks, and the greatest mystery of the Christian world, the secret of the Ark of the Covenant. This narrative takes us deep into the heart of Africa, during a time when history was written not by colonizers but by kings, warriors, and traders of indigenous peoples. It is an immersion into a world where reality and legend are so intertwined that one cannot be distinguished from the other. The kingdom of Aksum, the ancient Ethiopian empire, must be understood through the layers of time that nourished and shaped it long before it rose to its grandeur. The history of the Ethiopian highlands did not begin with Aksum, rather, Aksum was the culmination of millennia of cultural development, trade, and migration that transformed this region into one of the world's oldest centers of civilization. The earliest shadows in this story are cast by the legendary land of Punt, a mysterious kingdom that Egyptian pharaohs sent expeditions to over many centuries. From the 3rd millennium BC onward, Egyptian texts mention Punt as a land of gods, a territory from which the most precious commodities such as frankincense, myrrh, black ebony, ivory, gold, exotic animals, and slaves were transported to the Nile Valley. The renowned expedition commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut around the 14th century BC is vividly depicted on the intricate reliefs adorning her funerary temple at Deir el-Bahri. On these ancient wall carvings, we observe Egyptian ships sailing toward a distant, exotic land, where they are greeted by local inhabitants led by their chief and accompanied by his imposing wife. Their dwellings, constructed on stilts above the water, are meticulously rendered, along with the lush vegetation and diverse fauna that characterize this remote region. Although the exact location of this expedition remains a subject of ongoing debate among scholars, the majority concur that it took place somewhere within the territories of what are now Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, and northeastern Ethiopia, that is, at the very heartland of what would later become the mighty Aksumite Empire. This suggests that long before Aksum rose to prominence, the peoples inhabiting these regions had already engaged in complex trade networks and maintained contact with one of the most illustrious civilizations of the ancient world. They were not isolated tribes but active participants in a sophisticated economic system centered around the Red Sea, bridging Africa and the broader Middle Eastern region. The development of this commercial and cultural sphere received a significant boost when new influences arrived from across the Red Sea, specifically from southern Arabia. Around the 7th century BC, the powerful Sabaean kingdom thrived in what is now Yemen. This was the land of Saba, famously associated through biblical tradition with the legendary Queen of Sheba, who according to historical and religious texts, journeyed to King Solomon. The Sabaeans were master irrigators, engineering extraordinary dams and waterways that transformed the arid landscape into fertile agricultural lands. They excelled in trade, particularly controlling the lucrative spice routes that traversed the region, facilitating the flow of incenses, myrrh, and other exotic commodities. Driven by the pursuit of new resources and trading posts, they began establishing colonies along the African coast of the Red Sea, marking a wave of colonization that was less about conquest and more about cultural and demographic exchange. This migration represented a synthesis of peoples and traditions, blending South Arabian technological innovations with local African traditions. Those coming from southern Arabia brought with them advanced craftsmanship, including stone construction techniques, sophisticated agriculture, and most notably, the earliest form of writing. Their monumental script from southern Arabia, which would later influence the development of the Guizi script in Aksum, served as a foundational element of what would become the ancient Aksumite writing system. The religious pantheon of the newcomers, headed by the moon god Al-Makka, fused with indigenous African deities and beliefs, giving rise to a hybrid spiritual tradition. This fertile cultural mixing led to the birth of a distinctive civilization, often called Proto-Aksumite by historians. The apex of this Sabaean Africa syncretism materialized in the 5th century BC with the establishment of a kingdom known as Dad or DMT. Its capital was situated in the region of what is now Ahai, in northern Ethiopia, where impressive ruins still stand as silent witnesses to its former grandeur. Foremost among these remains is a magnificent temple dedicated to the moon god Al-Makka. The precise stone-cutting techniques used in constructing this temple, with its perfectly fitted blocks and mortarless masonry, reflect advanced architectural traditions rooted in southern Arabia. The rulers of DMT bore the title Mokarab, a designation shared with early Sabaean rulers, emphasizing their cultural and political connections. Archaeological findings, including scant inscriptions, allude to a well-organized state with centralized authority and an emerging complex society. Yet, the history of DMT remains shrouded in mystery. By the 2nd century BC, the kingdom suddenly fell into decline for reasons that are not entirely understood, vanishing from historical records. Some scholars suggest that it fragmented into smaller proto-state entities, others hypothesize that weakening ties with South Arabia played a role. What is certain is that a dark age ensued, lasting several centuries, during which the once glorious kingdom disappeared from the regional stage, leaving behind only scattered remnants and clues to its past glory. During this period, in the quiet and largely unknown stretches of the Tigray region, just west of the city of Aha, a new and powerful force was silently taking shape. This emerging power inherited much from the ancient kingdom of Damat, its technologies, cultural connections, and its people, yet it was no longer merely a colony of Africa or a peripheral area on the southern fringes of the Arabian world. Instead, it had developed into a distinct and emerging African state, eager to make its voice heard on the global stage. Its capital city was called Aksum, a name that would soon become legendary. This nascent kingdom was destined to surpass its predecessors in influence and splendor, and it was preparing itself meticulously to step onto the world arena. As the gloomy shadows of the Dark Ages, which followed the fall of the Damat kingdom, began to recede, a new dawn appeared on the horizon of history. By the beginning of the Common Era, on the Ethiopian highlands, a new center of power had fully taken form, the Aksumite kingdom. Its rapid rise was driven not merely by military conquest but primarily by the strategic brilliance with which it utilized its advantageous geographic position. Aksum became a crucial hub in an extensive global trade network, linking the Roman Empire with the lands of India and the deeper interior of Africa. It was trade more than warfare that transformed this modest mountain kingdom into a flourishing empire. An invaluable source of insight into this early period is an anonymous Greek geographical work known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, written around the middle of the 1st century. This document vividly describes the maritime routes, ports, commodities, and political landscape along the coasts of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Within this detailed account, Aksum and its principal port, Adulis, occupy a prominent place. Adulis, situated along the Red Sea coast in what is now Eritrea, served as the gateway for Aksum to the broader world. It was a bustling port, teeming with ships coming from Roman Egypt and other regions, laden with textiles, garments, copper and tin ingots, wine, olive oil, and glassware. However, beyond these goods, the list of exported commodities from Adulis was even more significant. The primary export was ivory, a product highly valued throughout the Roman Empire, valued as much as gold. The people of Aksum controlled the hunting of elephants deep within Africa and supplied vast quantities of ivory to the global market. In addition to ivory, they exported tortoise shells, rhinoceros horns, obsidian, frankincense, myrrh, slaves, and exotic animals destined for Roman circuses. The Periplus also makes mention of the first known king of Aksum by name, King Zalzalus. The author describes him as a man of modest habits, somewhat parsimonious but otherwise upright and well-versed in Greek literature. This small detail reveals much about the character of Aksum's elite. By the 1st century, the ruling class was already Hellenized to a notable extent. They spoke and read Greek, the lingua franca of the broader Hellenistic world at that time, which facilitated diplomatic and commercial relations with the Roman Empire. Furthermore, the figure of Zalzalus suggests that he was a shrewd and pragmatic ruler, personally overseeing trade that brought him enormous profits. Yet, Aksum was not simply a passive supplier of raw materials, it also played an active role as an intermediary in the trade network. It likely controlled and traded various goods, acting as a vital link connecting distant regions and civilizations, thereby strengthening its position within this vast economic web. In summary, this early period in Aksum's history was marked by a combination of strategic geographic positioning, savvy leadership, and active participation in international commerce, all of which set the stage for a future empire that would dominate regional politics and trade for centuries to come. The merchants and sailors of Aksum mastered the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean, opening direct maritime routes that linked their kingdom with India. Goods from Indian ports, spices, silk, and precious gems were imported into Aksum, only to be re-exported to Roman traders in the city of Adulis. This vibrant trade network enabled Aksum to dominate a significant segment of what was once the mighty Silk Road by sea, transforming the kingdom into a major rival to the South Arabian city-states and Persia themselves. Such wealth fueled the ambitions of Aksum's monarchs, allowing them to pursue an active policy of conquest and expansion. Over time, they subdued the entire Ethiopian highlands, the coast of the Red Sea, and even parts of present-day Sudan, consolidating their control over these regions. Yet, their ambitions did not stop at the shores. In the 3rd century, driven by greed and a desire for greater power, they launched campaigns of expansion into South Arabia, aiming to reclaim territories considered ancestral lands. This led to clashes with local kingdoms, most notably the Himyarite kingdom. By the end of the same century, the Aksumite king proudly bore the regal title of Nagash-Naguzit, meaning King of Kings, and called himself ruler of Aksum, Himyar, Ridin, Saba, Salhan, Siamo, Bega, and Kesu. Such declarations were a clear assertion of their intention to be recognized as a great imperial power, and the world began to acknowledge this status. Starting from the late 2nd century, under the rule of King Endubis, Aksum began minting its own coins crafted from gold, silver, and bronze, an immensely significant development. In the ancient world, the right to strike gold coins was a privilege reserved only for major empires. By establishing this monetary independence, Aksum placed itself alongside Rome and Persia. Early Aksumite coins depicted their rulers adorned with pagan symbols such as discs and crescents and inscribed legends in Greek. These coins, which archaeologists find from Rome to India, serve as silent witnesses to the power and prosperity of the Aksumite trading empire. By the dawn of the 1st century, Aksum had reached the zenith of its influence. It was a wealthy, centralized state with a formidable army and navy, actively engaged in global politics and commerce. Its ruling elite was cosmopolitan and receptive to external influences. However, this openness and close relationship with the Roman Empire would soon steer Aksum towards one of the most radical transformations in its history, abandoning the old pagan gods and adopting a new faith originating from across the seas. Meanwhile, caravans filled with luxury goods journeyed toward the coast, and in the port of Adulis, officials calculated customs duties, while deep within the Ethiopian highlands, in the heart of Aksum's capital, an unprecedented construction frenzy unfolded. The rulers of Aksum, enriched by international trade, sought to immortalize their power and glory through monumental architecture. Their aspiration led to the creation of a distinctive style and the erection of grand monuments, which continue to astonish modern visitors through their imposing presence, most famously, the Aksumite stele. The stela complexes of Aksum stand among the most mysterious and awe-inspiring archaeological sites in the world. For several centuries, roughly from the 2nd to the 4th century AD, Aksumite kings installed these colossal granite monoliths as tomb markers or cenotaphs, commemorating their graves. These were no mere rough-hewn stones, each was a masterpiece of artistry and engineering ingenuity. In their construction, massive monolithic stones were meticulously carved out of solid granite blocks within quarry sites situated several kilometers away from the city. Afterward, through methods that remain partly mysterious to us even today, these colossal stones were transported and then erected vertically at their designated locations. Among these stone monuments, the largest and most imposing replicas emulated multi-story buildings, creating an impression of architectural grandeur on a monumental scale. Artisans working with remarkable precision carved intricate details into the stone, meticulously reproducing elements characteristic of Aksumite palatial architecture. Features such as rows of wooden beams projecting from the walls, known as monkey heads, along with windows, doors, and even stone fastenings on false doors at their bases. The most renowned surviving stela, famously called the Stele of King Ezana, reaches a height of about 24 meters, standing as a testament to the ancient builder's skill. Another notable stone monument, often referred to as the Aksum obelisk, measures approximately 24.5 meters in height. This obelisk was removed from Ethiopia during the era of Mussolini in the year 1937 and was transported to Italy. It was only after decades, specifically, in the year 2005, that the obelisk was returned to Ethiopia, symbolizing a restoration of historical pride and cultural heritage. However, the ultimate centerpiece of this giant-scale construction project was intended to be the Great Stele. It was planned to stand an astonishing 33 meters tall and weigh an estimated 520 tons. If successfully erected, it would have been the largest monolith ever carved and installed by human hands in the ancient world. Regrettably, this colossal monument was never completed. During the installation process, the Great Stele collapsed and shattered into pieces, an event shrouded in ambiguity but believed to have occurred in the early 1st century of our era. This catastrophe is often interpreted metaphorically as marking the end of a significant age or epoch. Soon after, the kingdom of Aksum embraced Christianity, and the tradition of erecting immense pagan stelae was permanently interrupted. But what did the religion behind these gigantic stone structures entail? What spiritual beliefs inspired such titanic efforts? The religious system of the Aksumites was a complex syncretic mixture, blending ancient African cults and deities with influences from South Arabia. At the heart of their pantheon was the god Asta, a creator deity associated with the heavens, comparable to the southern Arabian Adar and the Mesopotamian Ishtar. Asta was worshipped throughout the kingdom, revered as a supreme divine figure. Yet, the most sacred protector of the royal lineage was the war god Maram. Ethiopian kings regarded Maram as their divine ancestor, often crediting their victories and divine right to rule to him. In their inscriptions, they frequently described themselves as the sons of the undefeated Maram. Greek authors of antiquity identified Maram with the deity Eris, emphasizing the parallels with warfare and victory gods known across various cultures. Beyond these principal gods, the pantheon was rich with other divine beings, including Beker, the god of the sea, suggesting a nuanced and diverse spiritual landscape. Religious rituals most likely involved animal sacrifices, conducted both within temple precincts and on open sacred sites that served as communal gathering places. The king himself functioned not only as a political leader but also as the high priest, acting as a divine intermediary between the human world and the divine realm. The construction and erection of the stelae formed a crucial part of the royal cult, serving as physical representations of the divine authority and cosmic axis. These stone giants were far more than mere grave markers. They symbolized the axis of the cosmos, linking Earth with the sky, and embodied the divine sovereignty of the ruler. They were meant to confer immortality upon the king, visually demonstrating his divine status and eternal rule to both his subjects and foreign visitors. In addition to the stelae, Aksumite architecture revealed itself through the grandeur of monumental tombs and palaces. Archaeologists have uncovered beneath the largest stelae a network of complex subterranean catacombs, built from massive, precisely hewn granite blocks. Among the most impressive of these is a tomb known as the Mausoleum, distinguished by its massive stone door and multiple chambers. The palaces of Aksumite monarchs, though mostly reduced to foundations today, were undoubtedly magnificent structures, reflecting the wealth and power of their rulers and their sophisticated architectural ingenuity. We have the ability to reconstruct their appearance based on images found on steles and from descriptions available to us. The most renowned among these ruins is the Taka Meryem Palace in Aksum, which, according to estimates, covered an area of approximately 120 by 80 meters and possibly reached the height of several floors. These palace complexes were akin to fortified structures, featuring massive walls and towers that served as the living quarters, throne rooms, administrative offices, and storage areas. All this monumental architecture, combined with a complex religious system, was designed with a singular purpose: the glorification and deification of the royal authority. Such structures formed the ideological foundation of the Aksumite Empire, embodying its power and divine legitimacy. However, this seemingly indestructible foundation, as solid and permanent as the granite cliffs of distant mountains, was destined to be shattered and replaced by a new influence arriving from lands far away. The forest of stone giants, and by this, one might imagine the sprawling monuments and statues, stood silently in expectation of a dawn that would herald a new faith, one capable of forever transforming the face of Aksum and the entire Ethiopian region. Meanwhile, the engineers and workers in Aksum continued their efforts to raise these stone colossi, attempting to breathe life into their silent forms. Simultaneously, the priests of Maram performed bloody sacrifices in honor of their kings, holding rituals that reinforced the divine status of their rulers. Yet, underneath this stage of grandeur, history was preparing for one of its most dramatic turns in the destiny of the African continent. This shift would not occur through massive battles or the opening of new trading routes, but rather through the unfolding story of two young Christian boys hailing from a distant Phoenician city called Tyre. These boys, by sheer fate, found themselves far from home on the soil of Aksum. Their names were Frumentius and Ethiopia'S, and it was foretold that they would become the apostles of Ethiopia itself. The detailed account of their adventures is preserved in the writings of a church historian from the 1st century, Rufinus Aquiliensis. According to his narrative, a philosopher from Tyre named Meropius undertook a journey into India, taking with him his two young relatives, Frumentius and Ethiopia'S. On their return voyage, their ship stopped at one of Aksum's ports along the Red Sea, where they came to resupply with fresh water. At that time, Aksum was experiencing a diplomatic rupture with Rome, and local inhabitants, allegedly enraged by this discontinuity, attacked the ship, killing all members of the crew and the passengers. Miraculously, only these two boys survived, found beneath a tree while they were reading a book. They were then brought before the Aksumite court. The ruler of Aksum, whose name is not recorded but is believed to have been Asanas, likely the father of the future king Ezana, recognized the boy's remarkable abilities. Ethiopia'S became his cupbearer, a trusted position that involved serving the king's wine, while the older and more capable Frumentius was appointed treasurer and secretary. Gaining the trust and respect of the monarch, the boys proved to be diligent and loyal aides. When this king died, he left his young son Ezana on the throne, and his widow, the queen mother, persuaded Frumentius and Ethiopia'S to remain and assist her in ruling the kingdom as well as to serve as tutors and guides for the young heir. With considerable influence at court now in their hands, Frumentius, a devout Christian himself, began to utilize this power to spread his faith. He sought out Christian merchants from the Roman Empire who lived and traded in Aksum, offering them assistance and encouraging the construction of places of worship. Through these efforts, he established a small yet influential Christian community within what was primarily a pagan realm, fundamentally shaping the region's religious landscape. Most importantly, Frumentius and Ethiopia'S took it upon themselves to educate the young king Ezana not only in the sciences and the arts of governance but also in the core tenets of Christian doctrine. Their work laid the groundwork for the profound transformation of Aksum from a pagan powerhouse into one of the earliest Christian kingdoms, an impact that would resonate through history and fundamentally alter the spiritual course of Ethiopia. When Ezana reached the age of majority and took power around the year 330, both Frumentius and Ethiopia'S approached him with a request to allow them to return to their homeland. Ethiopia'S chose to do so, and he made his way back to Tyre, where he recounted his story to Rufinus. However, Frumentius had a different mission in mind. Instead of heading to Tyre, he traveled to Alexandria, the renowned center of Christian thought and influence in the eastern Mediterranean at that time. There, he had a significant meeting with the illustrious patriarch Athanasius, with whom he shared details about his work in Aksum and the spiritual fruits that had begun to mature in that land for the new faith. Frumentius asked the patriarch to send a bishop to Aksum, one who could lead and organize the nascent church there. Athanasius, after hearing Frumentius's account, convened a council of bishops. After careful consideration and reflection, he reached a wise decision. He inquired who might be the most suitable person for this respectful and crucial task. Recognizing Frumentius's dedication and understanding of the region, the bishop was consecrated as a bishop himself and dispatched back to Aksum, now officially appointed as the head of the Ethiopian Church. Upon his return to Aksum, Frumentius, who would later be remembered by the Ethiopians as Abuna Salama, meaning Father of Peace, set to work with renewed vigor and purpose. His most notable achievement was the conversion of King Ezana himself. This turning point was hardly the result of an instant decision, rather, it was the culmination of a prolonged process in which the king's personal faith intertwined with pragmatic political calculations. The adoption of Christianity by Ezana elevated Aksum to a status comparable to that of the Roman Empire, which had also embraced Christianity under Constantine the Great. Such a shift reinforced the alliance between the two powers, strengthening both their trade routes and political ties. Evidence of this religious transformation can be found in the coins and inscriptions associated with Ezana's reign. Early on, his coins, like those of his predecessors, bore pagan symbols, discs and crescent moons. However, suddenly, there was a stark change. Christian symbols, notably the cross, appeared on his coins. These are believed to be among the earliest coins in the world that used the cross as a state symbol, predating even the Roman Empire's adoption of the symbol. This dramatic shift is also vividly reflected in the monumental inscriptions carved into Ezana's stele, tall stone monuments, one of the most famous being the stele at Aksum. Inscribed in 3 languages, Ge'ez, Sabaean, and Greek, these inscriptions aim to communicate the king's victories to his diverse subjects and foreign visitors. In the earlier versions of these inscriptions, Ezana expressed gratitude to pagan gods such as Astra, Bahara, and Medrim, along with the undefeated Maram. But in a subsequent, more elaborate inscription, created after his victory over the Noba people in what is now Sudan, the tone changes radically. The king proclaims that, through faith in God and through the power of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, he, Ezana, king of Aksum, led the war against the Noba because they had rebelled. From that point on, he no longer refers to himself as the son of Maram but as the servant of God. The inscription concludes with a call to defend the Lord of Heaven, who made him a king, emphasizing the divine authority that now underpinned his rule. The baptism of Ezana and the official declaration of Christianity as the state religion of Aksum around the years 340 or 350 of the Common Era marked a momentous event in world history. Aksum became only the second state in the world, after Armenia, to officially adopt Christianity as its religion, and it was the first great power to do so on a national scale. This choice decisively shaped the civilization and identity of Ethiopia, transforming it into a unique Christian island amidst surrounding pagan peoples and later Islamic civilizations. The decision to embrace Christianity forever set Ethiopia on a distinct path, fostering a Christian cultural and political identity that has persisted for centuries and continues to define the nation even today. The radiant light, emanating from 2 orphan children from a gladiator school, cast its glow over the African highlands and, astonishingly, this luminous reflection has persisted throughout centuries. The adoption of Christianity by the Kingdom of Aksum did not signify decline or weakness, quite the opposite, it marked the onset of its golden age, a period stretching from the mid-4th to the mid-6th century. During these centuries, Aksum's remarkable strength was amplified through strengthened ideological and political alliances with the Eastern Roman Empire, known in later times as Byzantium. This strategic partnership propelled Aksum to its zenith, fueling its prosperity, military might, and expanding influence on the international stage. It was during this epoch that the kingdom earned recognition as one of the world's preeminent powers, with its significance resonating far beyond its borders. One of the most compelling testimonies to Aksum's grandeur and influence comes from the writings of the Persian religious thinker of the 2nd century, Mani, the founder of Manichaeism. In an effort to illustrate the universal scope of his teachings, Mani enumerated 4 great empires governing the world. The first was Babylon and Persia, the second Rome, the third the kingdom of the Aksumites, and the fourth China. The placement of Aksum among such colossal civilizations reveals the profound impact it had on contemporaries, who saw it as a force to be reckoned with on equal footing with the mightiest empires known to mankind. But what underpinned this extraordinary power? Firstly, trade continued to flourish across Aksum's territories. The kingdom maintained control over vital maritime routes in the Red Sea, with its port of Adulis serving as the chief hub for exchange between the Mediterranean world and India. For Byzantine merchants, Aksum was an ideal trading partner, providing direct access to rich Indian and African commodities, while allowing them to bypass hostile territories. The golden coins of Aksum from this era, now bearing inscriptions such as a cross and the phrase grace of God or joy and peace for the people, traveled vast distances from the far reaches of southern India to the shores of England. These coins, minted from high-quality gold with consistent weight, became a reliable international currency, demonstrating Aksum's economic clout and sophisticated monetary system. Secondly, Aksum's military power remained formidable. Its kings engaged in constant warfare with neighboring peoples, relentlessly expanding their empire. They launched military campaigns into Nubia, modern-day Sudan, subjugating local kingdoms such as Nabatea and Meroe. The Aksumite rulers consolidated their southern influence over peoples like the Aga, while also asserting dominance over regions to the north. Their armies, consisting of well-trained infantry and possibly war elephants, inspired both fear and respect among neighboring nations, securing their hold over crucial territories. In addition to its political and military achievements, Aksum experienced a cultural renaissance during this period. The unique Aksumite script, the Guizi alphabet, finally reached its mature form. Initially consonant-based, like its Semitic ancestors, recording only consonants, the script was reformed in this epoch into an abugida, where each symbol represented a syllable comprising a consonant and a vowel. This transformation made the script particularly apt for capturing the nuances of the local language and facilitated the recording of literature, religious texts, and administrative documents. Indeed, the Bible was translated into Guizi, marking the beginning of a rich tradition of Ethiopian Christian literature that would evolve over subsequent centuries. In architecture, the grandeur of earlier pagan monumentality gave way to the construction of stone churches. Although the earliest Aksumite churches have not survived, likely destroyed or constructed from perishable materials such as wood, ruins and foundations serve as silent witnesses to their past splendor. Structures like the enormous basilicas of Enda Simeon and Enda Michael in Aksum point to the scale and ambition of these religious edifices. They were probably modeled after Byzantine church designs but incorporated local building techniques and artistic traditions, reflecting a unique cultural synthesis that would influence Ethiopian ecclesiastical architecture for centuries to come. In sum, the period of Aksum's most illustrious history was characterized by an extraordinary combination of flourishing trade, military prowess, cultural and religious development, all contributing to its standing as one of the most prominent civilizations of its time. Through these multifaceted achievements, Aksum established its legacy as a true beacon of power, faith, and cultural innovation, whose influence continues to resonate to this day. The society of Aksum was characterized by a complex and hierarchical social structure. At its apex sat the king, known as Nagashimguzit, whose authority was considered to be divine in origin, bestowed by the gods themselves. Beneath him, the highest echelons of society comprised the aristocracy, occupying key military and administrative positions that ensured the smooth functioning and stabilization of the kingdom. Religion played a central role in governance and societal duties, with the clergy wielding significant influence, initially led by bishops, later by metropolitans appointed from Alexandria, a tradition that guaranteed a lasting spiritual connection between the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and its ancient roots in Egypt. The population primarily consisted of free farmers, who organized themselves into communities, cultivating the land and fulfilling their obligation to pay taxes to the state, thus contributing to the empire's prosperity. Alongside these free peasants, there existed a system of slavery, mainly fueled by prisoners captured during wars, which provided labor for various state and private enterprises. During this period, Aksum actively engaged in international diplomacy, forming strategic alliances and cultivating relationships beyond its borders. The Byzantine emperors viewed Aksum as a vital ally in their broader rivalry with the Sasanian Persian Empire, recognizing the importance of cooperation in maintaining regional stability. Both empires, Aksum and Byzantium, were among the largest and most influential Christian states of their time, united by faith but also by shared economic and political interests. Their joint priorities included safeguarding maritime trade routes through the Red Sea and diminishing Persian influence across the region. This alliance reached its peak in the early 6th century, when the Aksumite king received a direct appeal from the Byzantine emperor to undertake a bold naval expedition across the ocean. The goal was to defend fellow Christians and extend their mutual influence. It was during this period that one of Aksum's most renowned rulers ascended to the throne, known in Ethiopian tradition as a saintly figure, whose reign marked both the zenith of Aksum's power and the beginning of its gradual decline. His name was Khalin, and his rule was characterized by remarkable achievements that made the empire a formidable force. However, his leadership also set in motion events that would ultimately lead to a lengthy period of hardship and decline. The golden age of Aksum shone brightly, filled with prosperity and stability, fortified by a flourishing treasury and an alliance with the mighty Byzantine Empire. Yet, this period of grandeur was not destined to last forever. In the early 6th century, alarming news started to reach the empire from across the Red Sea, originating from the distant region of South Arabia. There, in the kingdom of Himyar, an area that had long been under Aksumite influence, new rulers rose to power with a ruthless streak fueled by intense religious zealotry, threatening to plunge the entire region into bloodshed. This new leader was known as Zunuwas, or Dhu Nuwas, as referred to in Ethiopian historical sources. He was a zealous Jew, fiercely committed to his faith and committed to promoting it at any cost. South Arabia, during this time, was a battleground of fierce religious conflicts, with traditional pagan beliefs still holding strong, Christian communities actively expanding their influence, supported by Aksum and Byzantium, and an influential Jewish community wielding significant power within local society. Upon ascending to power, Zunuwas decided to forcibly impose Judaism upon the region, aiming to eradicate Christianity, which he viewed as an alien religion aligned with enemy states. His brutal campaign reached its tragic climax in the notorious massacre at the city of Nadran, which devastated the flourishing Christian community living there. Zunuwas besieged the city, capturing it and carrying out a massacre that shocked the wider Christian world. Individuals refusing to abandon their faith were burned alive or slaughtered in mass executions. According to various sources, the death toll from this atrocity numbered in the thousands, spreading horror and outrage throughout Christendom. News of this monstrous slaughter quickly spread, provoking widespread condemnation and deep concern among Christian nations. Survivors from Nadran managed to reach the courts of the Byzantine Emperor Justin I and of the Aksumite king, also known as Ethiopia'S, appealing desperately for refuge and protection from imminent danger. Emperor Justin, deeply engaged with his armies defending the borders of his vast realm, found himself unable to personally dispatch an expeditionary force to Arabia. Instead, he chose to send an envoy to his chief regional ally, King Caleb. His diplomatic mission aimed to persuade the Ethiopia'S monarch to assume the role of protector of the Christian faith in the region, promising him both financial aid and logistical support. For Caleb, this request was not solely motivated by religious duty, it carried significant weight in terms of prestige and worldly influence. The kingdom of Himyar was not merely a neighboring state but a vital trading partner and a fierce competitor. The Aksumite monarchs had long laid claim to suzerainty over it, viewing it as an essential extension of their geopolitical sphere. The challenge issued by Zunuwas, a rival claimant, was more than a mere confrontation, it was a direct blow to Aksum's dominance in the region, making a prompt response unavoidable. In response, Caleb began preparing an enormous military campaign, the largest in Aksum's history up to that point. The planning and mobilization process took around 2 years. At the port of Adulis, an immense fleet was assembled, reportedly numbering over 100 ships, ready to carry the army across the sea. Estimates of the forces involved range from 30,000 to more than 120,000 soldiers. Such an undertaking represented an extraordinarily complex logistical effort, requiring careful planning to transport not only troops but also weapons, provisions, and water supplies necessary for a prolonged campaign. It is believed that the Byzantine Empire possibly contributed ships and financial support to this formidable effort. By the year 525, the Aksumite fleet had crossed the Red Sea, making its way toward the Arabian coast. Zunuwas anticipated an invasion and responded by blocking the main harbor of his kingdom, Zufar, with a chain and deploying his troops along the shoreline to defend it. However, Caleb outmaneuvered him through strategic ingenuity. Instead of a direct assault on the harbor, Caleb's forces landed in an alternative location, striking the Himyarite army from the flank. What ensued was a fierce and protracted battle. The seasoned Aksumite troops, hardened by numerous previous conflicts, managed to rout the forces commanded by Zunuwas. According to one account, Zunuwas, in a desperate bid to escape capture, directed his horse toward the sea and drowned. The victory was overwhelming and complete. Caleb entered the capital of Himyar, reinstating Christian authority there and placing a puppet ruler, a local Christian leader, on the throne. He also left a strong Aksumite garrison behind, solidifying Aksum's influence over the conquered territory. After accomplishing his mission, Caleb triumphantly returned to Aksum, his prestige and power reaching new heights. This victory marked the zenith of the Aksumite kingdom's might. For the first time, its dominion stretched so far, and its influence on the international stage was unmatched. King Caleb entered history not only as a ruler but also as a saint, a defender of faith, and a formidable warrior king. Nevertheless, this triumph proved to be a Pyrrhic victory. The expedition and subsequent occupation of Himyar drained Aksum's treasury and military resources. Maintaining control over such a distant and hostile land proved to be an enormous challenge. Soon after Caleb's departure, a rebellion erupted within the Aksumite garrison in Yemen, led by one of his generals named Abraha. This rebel ousted the appointed vassal ruler and proclaimed himself the ruler of Himyar. Caleb dispatched 2 punitive expeditions against the rebel leader, but both attempts failed to suppress him. Ultimately, Aksum was forced to recognize Abraha's authority in exchange for a formal acknowledgement of his suzerainty and the payment of tribute. Abraha, ambitious and powerful, soon undertook grand building projects in his capital, constructing a magnificent cathedral that aimed to transform his city into a major pilgrimage center, rivaling even Mecca itself. According to Islamic tradition, it was specifically he who led the famous expedition to Mecca with elephants, an event dated around the year of the elephant, approximately 570 years after the birth of the Prophet Muhammad. This campaign ended in failure, which was perceived by many as a remarkable divine miracle. Ultimately, the dominance of Aksum, first over Ethiopia, then later over Yemen, was broken by a new regional power, Persia. By the end of the 6th century, in response to appeals from the local aristocracy, the Persians dispatched their navy to Yemen, driving out the Aksumites and terminating their control over those eastern territories once and for all. As a result, Aksum permanently lost its overseas possessions, drawing a significant blow to its imperial reach. The fighting in the region of Himyar proved catastrophic for Aksum, marking the beginning of an imperial overextension that would have lasting repercussions. Massive resources were poured into this military campaign, which, in the long run, failed to generate sustainable benefits for the empire. The treasury was drained entirely, leaving the once respetless treasury empty. During that turbulent period, the most formidable warriors either fell on the battlefields of Arabia or became integrated into the armies of the newly arriving regime of Abrahia. While Aksum was preoccupied with foreign conflicts and territorial struggles, it failed to address the mounting internal issues and challenges on its other borders. The reputation and prestige of King Caleb were immense and widespread, yet it was after his reign that the empire, which had once reached its zenith, gradually but inexorably began its decline. The victorious yet exhausting campaign in Yemen marked a crucial turning point and irreversible point of no return for Aksum. Although externally the empire still seemed powerful and formidable, internally it was already undergoing processes of decline that could no longer be halted. The next several centuries became a slow, relentless period of decay, isolation, and fierce struggle for survival. This era of decline eventually succeeded the so-called Golden Age, ushering in what is often called the Age of Twilight for the Aksumite kingdom. The causes behind this gradual downfall were multifaceted, encompassing both external geopolitical upheavals and internal ecological and economic crises. The first and perhaps most devastating blow was environmental in nature, a significant climate change. Starting from the mid-6th century, a pronounced cooling trend affected the entire world, a phenomenon known as the Late Antique Little Ice Age. Scientists have linked this period of cooling to a series of massive volcanic eruptions, which injected enormous quantities of ash into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and causing widespread temperatures to plummet. For Aksum, a civilization dependent on agriculture and situated within a challenging mountainous climate, this shift had disastrous consequences. Reduced rainfall, prolonged droughts, and crop failures led to widespread famine and resource depletion. The land, once capable of feeding a growing population and supporting both the army and the administrative machinery, could no longer sustain its previous levels of productivity. This ecological crisis undermined the very foundation of Aksum's power, dealing a blow that proved nearly impossible to recover from. A second major calamity was a deadly epidemic. In the year 541, the Byzantine Empire experienced the first recorded pandemic of bubonic plague, known to history as Justinian's plague. This devastating disease spread rapidly through trade routes across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Given Aksum's close ties with the Byzantine world and its extensive maritime connections, it is highly probable that the plague reached its ports, from where it seeped further inland throughout the kingdom. The epidemic is estimated to have claimed the lives of up to one-third of the population, causing a profound demographic crisis and dealing a severe economic blow to the state. Yet the most decisive strike of all came from outside forces. At the dawn of the 7th century, a new, fervent religion Islam emerged on the Arabian Peninsula, igniting a passionate movement that would soon reshape the entire regional landscape. After the Prophet Muhammad's death in 632, rapid Arab conquests commenced with astonishing speed, drastically transforming the political and cultural map of the Middle East and beyond. This wave of expansion would soon extend its influence far beyond the Arabian deserts, altering the balance of power across continents. The Arab armies dealt a devastating blow to the Persian Empire, conquering key territories and stripping away vital regions from the Byzantines. By the middle of the 6th century, the entire Middle East, along with North Africa, had fallen under the control of the Islamic Caliphate, transforming the regional political landscape dramatically. For the Kingdom of Aksum, this turn of events represented a catastrophic geopolitical upheaval. The once flourishing empire found itself cut off from its most significant ally and trading partner, Byzantium. The Red Sea, which for centuries had served as Aksum's inland sea and a source of prosperity, ceased to be a conduit for wealth and commerce, turning instead into a body of water dominated by Arab powers. As Muslim armies expanded, they quickly seized Egypt and eventually took control of the Red Sea coast, severing crucial trade routes that connected Aksum to the Mediterranean world. The flow of goods, gold, and resources that once sustained Aksum began to dry up, plunging the empire into economic decline. Curiously, initial contacts between Aksum and Muslim forces had remained peaceful. According to Islamic tradition, during the persecutions in Mecca, Prophet Muhammad advised a group of followers to seek refuge in Ethiopia, referred to as the land of Sheba, highlighting that a just Christian king governed there, one who did no harm to his subjects. Indeed, the Aksumite monarch Negus Asima ibn Abjar accepted Muslim refugees and refused to surrender them to the Quraysh persecutors. This episode, known as the First Hijra, set a precedent for respectful relations between the two peoples. However, as the caliphate grew stronger and transformed into a formidable maritime power, inevitable conflicts arose. Arab raiders increasingly targeted Aksum's ports and coastal settlements. In the early 6th century, they succeeded in temporarily capturing and destroying the port city of Adulis. Although the Aksumites managed to recover and defend their remaining holdings, the port never regained its former prominence. Trade activities came to a halt, and the once bustling economic hub was essentially lost. Consequently, Aksum found itself increasingly isolated both economically and politically. The minting of the gold coin, once a symbol of its wealth, ceased entirely, and the quality of silver and bronze currency rapidly declined. Stripped of the revenues generated by maritime commerce, Aksum had no choice but to redirect its resources inward. The political and economic heart of the empire gradually shifted from the northern region of Tigray to more southern territories, namely Lasta and Shawa. These areas, rich in fertile land, offered some stability but also brought increased isolation. The capital, the city of Aksum, slowly diminished in importance and sank into decline. The once cosmopolitan maritime empire became an inward-looking, agrarian feudal state, cut off from outside influence. This slow descent into decay was a prolonged and painful process, stretching across nearly 3 centuries. During this turbulent period, the once mighty kingdom persisted, but it was merely a shadow of its former grandeur. The authority of its rulers waned while regional feudal lords gained strength, gradually unraveling the fabric of the empire. Like a colossal tree whose roots have been severed, it continued to stand for a time but was doomed from the start. In the 10th century, the final, devastating blow was delivered, a destructive event that toppled what remained of this ancient power. Over those 3 centuries of decline, the twilight of Aksum was marked by gradual weakening, internal strife, and environmental crises. The once great empire, severed from the wider world and battered by internal and external pressures, slowly bled out its vitality. Its demise was not a quiet fading but rather a fiery catastrophe that swept through its cities and monasteries, leaving behind only ashes and ruins. The name of this destructive storm, passed down through generations and legends veiled in mystique, is said to be Sujud or Gudit or simply the Flame. The archaeological and historical records concerning this final catastrophic episode in the history of the Aksumite kingdom are remarkably scarce and often contradictory. We lack contemporaneous written sources that directly describe what transpired during those turbulent times, leaving us only with later Ethiopian chronicles, oral traditions passed down through generations, and a handful of vague references found in Arab texts. From these fragmented accounts, a vivid image emerges of a formidable warrior queen who, in the middle of the 10th century, led an uprising against the ruling Aksumite dynasty, establishing her own rule over the region for several decades. According to the most widely accepted version of Ethiopian tradition, this woman, named Judith, was of Jewish origin, believed to have come from a Jewish kingdom in the southern lands, possibly in the Semien Mountains, where a community of Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, had long resided. Driven by a fierce hatred towards the Christian Aksumite monarchy, she assembled a vast army and launched her campaign from the south, marching northward with blazing fury. Her invasion was marked by unprecedented destruction. Churches and monasteries were burned to the ground, Christian relics desecrated, clergy slaughtered, and the very memory of the Aksumite royal house sought to be erased. According to legend, she orchestrated a brutal massacre of the royal family, leaving no heirs but one infant, who was swiftly rescued and hidden in the distant province of Shoa by loyal servants. The ancient capital, the city of Aksum, fell into her hands and was razed, its towering stelae were damaged, and grand temples, such as the Church of St. Mary of Zion, alleged by tradition to have housed the Ark of the Covenant, were consumed by fire. The legend narrates that for a span of 40 years, her dynasty held sway over the land, ushering what is often described as a dark age of chaos and despair for Ethiopian Christianity. Yet, the true identity of this enigmatic woman remains a matter of intense debate among historians. Who exactly was Judith, the invader who plunged the kingdom into ruin? The most prevalent and traditional account claims she was of Jewish descent, perhaps a queen from the southern kingdom of Judea, aiming to restore her people's dominance or punish the Christian rulers. However, this version is also the most contentious. Some scholars argue that it was a later fabrication, constructed during the Solomonic dynasty's era to vilify an enemy by attributing to her a wrong faith. Interestingly, the Beta Israel community and other local traditions do not preserve any memory of such a powerful, conquering queen in their oral histories or genealogies. Alternatively, there is a hypothesis suggesting that Judith was a pagan ruler from one of the Aker tribes, a group dwelling further south beyond Aksum, known since ancient times for resisting assimilation and Christianization. From this perspective, her uprising was not primarily religious but a form of fierce pagan revenge, an attempt by the tribes of Aga to overthrow Aksumite dominance and restore their ancestral beliefs. This theory accounts more convincingly for the widespread destruction directed toward Christian symbols and sacred sites, portraying her as a leader fighting to preserve or restore pagan traditions in the face of Christian expansion. There is also a third, less accepted theory grounded in interpretations of Arab sources. Some researchers propose that a figure known as Queen Bani al-Mulla, mentioned by Arab writers as a conqueror of Abyssinia, might have been a ruler of a Muslim sultanate along the coast, rather than a Christian or Jewish leader. Nonetheless, this hypothesis commands far fewer supporters and remains speculative. Regardless of Judith's exact identity, whether she was a Jewish queen, a pagan chieftain, or someone else entirely, her invasion marked a decisive and disastrous turning point for Aksum. It delivered a mortal blow to an already weakened state, contributing profoundly to the decline and disintegration of the ancient empire. Her raid became the last, devastating chapter of Aksum's storied past, sealing its fate as a once mighty civilization that would, henceforth, endure only as fragmented memories and distant legends. The old political and religious centers of the ancient empire had been thoroughly destroyed, severing the centuries-old continuity of power that once unified its people. As a result, the once vibrant political and cultural landscape of the region was shattered, and the kingdom of Aksum as a political and cultural entity ceased to exist. The end of Queen Judith's reign, shrouded in mystery and legend, marked a pivotal turning point. It is believed that her successors were unable to maintain control, leading the nation into a period of chaos marked by internal conflicts and civil unrest. From this turbulent upheaval, however, a new force emerged, one that would eventually restore stability and influence. In the southern part of the territory, within the region known as Lasta, among the Aju peoples, a new dynasty rose to prominence and gained the throne. This was the Zagwe dynasty, which, having embraced Christianity, demonstrated the capacity to reunite the fractured lands under their rule. They considered themselves inheritors of the ancient Aksumite legacy, yet their capital was no longer the ruins of the old Aksum but a new city called Roa, what is now famously known as Lalibela. While the Epic of Aksum had officially come to a close, its enduring influence persisted, carried on and transformed by these new rulers. They saw themselves as the successors of the Aksumite kings, guiding Ethiopia along a renewed historical path. The dramatic destruction wrought by Queen Judith's fiery onslaught decimated the Old World, destroying cities, temples, and sacred sites of the Aksum Empire, yet her flames could not extinguish its spirit. The legacy of Aksum proved remarkably resilient, surviving beyond the ruins and becoming the foundation upon which the future Ethiopian civilization would be built. Not merely preserved, this heritage actively shaped the religious, cultural, and political contours of Ethiopia for centuries to come, leaving an indelible mark on its national identity and spiritual life. It also inspired the creation of Ethiopia's most revered and iconic religious symbols, its greatest national relics, embodying the spirit and achievements of ancient Aksum. The direct heirs to this grand tradition emerged prominently in the mid-10th century with the rise of the Zagwe dynasty. Although descended from the Aju peoples, historically enemies of the Aksumite kingdom, they absorbed and adapted elements of Aksum's religious and cultural heritage into their own governance. Recognizing that a direct bloodline connection to the Aksumite monarchs was unlikely, they sought legitimacy through intense religious devotion and zealotry. It was during the reign of the Zagwe rulers that one of the most ambitious architectural undertakings in human history was realized: the construction of a dozen monolithic rock-hewn churches in Lalibela. These churches, such as the famous Church of St. George in Bet Georges, built in the shape of crosses and carved directly out of the solid rock, stand as a direct continuation of Aksumite stoneworking traditions. If Aksum's builders aimed their monumental stele toward the heavens, then the Lalibela artisans delved deep into the earth, creating a new Jerusalem within the mountain. This was not simply a matter of construction but a profound theological act, an effort to recreate the sacred land of Jerusalem in the heart of Ethiopia, especially after Jerusalem had fallen under Muslim control. Through this monumental project, the Zagwe dynasty effectively appropriated the role of the region's foremost Christian bastion, affirming Ethiopia's spiritual significance and its connection to the divine. However, the Zagwe dynasty's rule came to an end in the year 1270. A new ruler named Yakub Amlak seized power, claiming to be a direct descendant of the last Aksumite king, himself believed to have escaped the slaughter orchestrated by Judith's forces. Moreover, he declared himself a legitimate heir not only of the Aksumite monarchs but also of the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, thus establishing the Solomonic dynasty. This dynasty, with brief interruptions, would reign over Ethiopia for many centuries, from the late 12th century until the overthrow of the last emperor, Haile Selassie, in 1974. Their long rule was marked by efforts to revive and legitimize Ethiopia's ancient Christian imperial identity, tying political authority firmly to religious and biblical traditions that spanned millennia. It was during the reign of this particular dynasty that the foundation of Ethiopia's national ideology was finally solidified, establishing a direct link between the ancient kingdom of Saba and biblical traditions. Central to this ideological construct was the legendary story of the Ark of the Covenant. According to the Ethiopian national epic known as the Kebra Nagast, which dates back to the 10th century, the Queen of Sheba, whom the Ethiopians referred to as Makeda, was actually a ruler of the ancient state of Aksum. The epic recounts that she journeyed to Jerusalem to meet King Solomon, and during her visit, she bore him a son named Menelik. As he grew older, Menelik decided to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem to see his father and learn more about his origins. Recognizing him as his son, Solomon welcomed Menelik and offered him the opportunity to stay in Jerusalem. However, Menelik chose to return to his homeland. In response, Solomon instructed the leaders of Israel to send their firstborn sons along with Menelik back to Ethiopia. According to the legend, the son of the high priest Azariah stole from the Jerusalem temple the most sacred relic, the Ark of the Covenant, and carried it to Aksum. This act confirmed and proclaimed that divine grace, or Zion itself, had shifted from Israel to Ethiopia. Consequently, the story asserts that the rulers of Ethiopian Solomon's dynasty became the new divine chosen ones, heralds of divine authority. Aksum thus transcended its status as merely an ancient capital city and was transformed into a sacred hub, the ultimate repository of the Arkansas. This legendary narrative became a powerful vehicle for legitimizing the authority of the Ethiopian monarchy and fostering a profound sense of national unity rooted in divine favor. It also served to explain the exceptional character of Ethiopian Christianity and its direct spiritual connection to the Old Testament tradition. To this day, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains that the Ark of the Covenant still resides in Aksum, carefully kept within a small chapel adjacent to the Church of St. Mary of Zion. Access to the sacred relic is granted exclusively to a single guardian monk whose entire life is devoted solely to this sacred duty, forever safeguarding the Ark from all outsiders. No one else has ever seen it with their own eyes. To the outside world, this remains a legend and a relic of myth, yet for millions of Ethiopian Christians, it is an unwavering truth and unassailable cornerstone of their faith and a fundamental element of their national identity. Beyond this legendary relic, Aksum endowed the Ethiopian nation with an even greater and enduring legacy. It was the cradle of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, rich in unique rituals, liturgical traditions, and ancient practices that trace their roots back to the Aksumite era. The earliest form of Ethiopian script, known as Guizi, also originates from this historical period. Although Guizi is considered a liturgical language that is no longer spoken colloquially and is classified as a dead language today, it remains the sacred language of the Ethiopian Church's rites. Much like Latin was to the Roman Catholic Church, Guizi continues to hold a vital spiritual significance. The modern Ethiopian alphabet, based on Guizi, serves as the written system for several languages of the country, including Amharic and Tigrinya, thereby cementing a shared sense of national consciousness. It is precisely this ancient and sacred legacy that fueled Ethiopian pride and a long-standing desire for independence throughout the centuries. Ethiopia remains unique in the African continent as the only nation, apart from the brief period of Italian occupation during the 20th century, that was never fully colonized. This remarkable resilience can largely be attributed to its deep-rooted history, which goes back to the time of Aksum. The city of Aksum, therefore, has not vanished into obscurity, rather, it has been transformed across centuries. It evolved from a powerful political and commercial capital into a sacred symbol, a cornerstone of Ethiopia's national identity and spiritual life. Aksum's legacy endures, representing the enduring strength of a civilization that gave rise to one of the most distinctive and ancient cultures in the world. Today, the ancient stone ruins silently gaze upon the sky, standing as timeless sentinels that remind us of an era long gone, a testament to a once glorious civilization. The whisper of the Ark of the Covenant story still echoes across the Ethiopian highlands, weaving an invisible thread that connects the distant past with the present, and hinting at what the future might hold. The history of the Aksumite kingdom is far more than a simple tale about a remote and exotic African state. It is an epic narrative of rise and fall, faith and power, adaptation and decline, filled with universal lessons that resonate even in today's world. Why, then, did this empire, which in its height stood shoulder to shoulder with great civilizations like Rome and Persia, fade into obscurity for many centuries within Western historical consciousness? And why is it so crucial to restore Aksum's rightful place in the pantheon of the greatest ancient civilizations? The reasons behind its centuries-long neglect are multifaceted. First, Aksum's geographical and cultural isolation played a significant role. After the 6th century, it was ensconced within the expanding Islamic world, cut off from European contact, and its successor state, Ethiopia, gradually slipped from the attention of European chroniclers and historians. Second, the historical narrative was long dominated by an Eurocentric perspective, which viewed African history through a lens that often dismissed or underestimated Africa's rich and complex past. For too long, the story of Africa was reduced to a narrative of European discovery and colonization, sidelining the great pre-colonial empires such as Aksum, Ghana, Mali, or the Great Zimbabwe. These civilizations did not fit neatly into the simplified version of history favored by many scholars, and so they were often ignored or undervalued. It was only in the 20th century, thanks to archaeological excavations, deciphering ancient inscriptions, and critical analysis of historical sources, that the world began to slowly acknowledge Aksum's significance once again. And this process of rediscovery compels us to re-evaluate many entrenched stereotypes about Africa's past. What lessons can we learn from the history of Aksum? The first one is the lesson of globalization. The story of Aksum exemplifies that the phenomenon of global interconnectedness predates the modern era by 2,000 years. Already in ancient times, a complex interwoven economy linked Europe, Africa, and Asia. Aksum's rise to prominence was intricately tied to this global trade network, serving as a vital hub for exchanging goods, ideas, and culture. Its decline demonstrates how deeply a civilization can suffer when it becomes excessively dependent on such a fragile, interconnected system. When trade routes were severed or disrupted, the empire's economy collapsed, teaching us the peril of putting too much reliance on external forces beyond one's control. The second lesson pertains to geopolitics and soft power. Aksum was not only a militarily formidable state but also a cultural hub capable of wielding influence through ideology and diplomacy. Its elite spoke Greek, the lingua franca of diplomacy and scholarship at the time. The Aksumite kings minted coins modeled after Roman currency, symbolizing a desire to align themselves with the imperial powers of the Mediterranean. Its adoption of Christianity was a masterstroke of soft power, an intelligent move that strengthened bonds with Byzantium, provided spiritual legitimacy, and integrated Aksum into the community of the most advanced civilizations of its era. This example clearly shows that cultural and ideological influence, soft power, can be as essential as military might in securing a state's longevity and prestige. The third lesson relates to ecology and environmental sustainability. The fall of Aksum serves as a grave warning about how the fate of civilizations is closely intertwined with their environmental conditions. Climate change, soil degradation, and deforestation all played roles in weakening the empire from within. Forests, which provided timber crucial for metallurgy and construction, were heavily exploited, leading to environmental depletion that undermined economic sustainability. As internal resources dwindled, the kingdom became more vulnerable to external pressures, ultimately contributing to its decline. This highlights an unmistakable link between ecological health and societal resilience, reminding us that sustainable management of natural resources is vital for the survival and prosperity of any civilization. In sum, the story of Aksum is rich with lessons about interconnectedness, cultural influence, and the importance of ecological balance that remain profoundly relevant today. Its history invites us to reconsider preconceived notions, to understand the complexities of ancient societies, and to recognize the enduring value of historical knowledge in guiding our future. The story of Aksum serves as a powerful reminder that no civilization, no matter how mighty or influential, can escape the fundamental laws of nature and history. The fourth lesson to be drawn from its legacy is one of resilience and adaptability, qualities that allowed Aksum to endure against overwhelming odds. Despite the catastrophic collapse of its empire in the 10th century, the enduring spirit of Aksum's culture and faith refused to disappear entirely. Instead, this ancient civilization managed to survive through remarkable resilience, holding steadfast to its core beliefs and traditions even as circumstances shifted around it. The Ethiopians succeeded in transforming the stability of their cultural identity into a new force, relocating their centers of power southward, where they established a fresh political and ideological foundation. This strategic migration and adaptation enabled them to preserve their unique heritage, effectively shielding it from the tide of oblivion, and maintaining their distinct identity in isolation for over 1,000 years. Such a feat exemplifies extraordinary endurance, a kind of resilience that commands admiration and astonishment. Today, what remains of Aksum is a modest town nestled in the northern part of Ethiopia. Life here proceeds at a slow, unhurried pace, echoing the tranquil rhythm of centuries past. Yet beneath the surface, beneath layers of dust and the passage of countless years, lie the ruins of a once great empire. Every year, archaeologists uncover fresh evidence from beneath the earth, remnants of palaces, tombs, and settlements long abandoned. These stones and artifacts gradually reveal stories that have begun to speak to us in whispers, hinting at a past far richer and more intricate than previously imagined. They illuminate a world that was far more complex and interconnected than we often believe, a time when Africa was not merely a passive object of history but an active participant, a continent home to powerful empires and distinctive civilizations that shaped the course of human development. The history of Aksum stands as a counterpoint to many common mythologies and preconceived notions about the past. It acts as a vital reminder that greatness can be born in unexpected places, away from the traditional centers of power, and that eras of neglect or forgetfulness can obscure entire worlds waiting to be rediscovered. Our task is to listen carefully to these voices emerging from beneath the soil, to interpret their silent messages and piece together a more authentic, multifaceted, and vibrant image of our shared human history. Only by understanding who we were in those ancient times can we truly grasp who we are today. We are grateful that you took the time to join us on this journey into the depths of history. Exploring stories like that of Aksum enriches our understanding of the past and, in turn, shapes our perspective on the present. If this recounting resonated with you, please continue to follow our explorations, share your thoughts in the comments, and consider sharing this story with others. Many more adventures through time await us, journeys into the most mysterious and majestic pages of our collective past, revealing truths that have long been hidden but are now longing to be rediscovered.